Hello, Happy, my old friend. I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. Thank you, Happy.
Welcome to A Captain's Log. I'm Brian Croyds, and as always, I couldn't or wouldn't want to do the show without Lily Fox-Lim.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Raj is also cooking up some cocoa so he can co-host us as guests in his universe. It's Raj's galaxy, and we're just living in it.
Do I sense a snarky, sarcastic tone in your voice on him hosting us as guests in his universe?
No.
You know, speaking of true guests, that's what I love about the show, is that we get the opportunity to interview people.
Bass, I'm so excited about our next guest. He has worked with a lot of Star Trek actors. He's a director, producer, writer, and he does it all.
Yes, and from what I heard, he's also acquainted with a friend of ours, producer Dustin.
Oh,
Right?
yes,
Yeah.
That's right. So he's an acquaintance with our own Dustin Serrano. Now, Dustin was a PA for a movie Scott was a cinematographer for.
How come we haven't met Dustin yet? Is he like me? An android?
Guys, a little off topic, but I can confirm Dustin is real. You know what we can also confirm with Scott when we interview him?
Okay.
The film is called Glimpse. But I'm more excited to hear about the sci-fi movie he wrote and directed, The Fifth Passenger.
Oh, wow. That sounds like an amazing film to watch. We should watch that.
We should, Lily, absolutely. Now, not only that, he also had Star Trek alumni in his movie. Also, I should mention he's a big Star Trek fan.
Wait, Star Trek alumni? Like who?
Oh, there's a lot. I know he's worked with Nichelle Nichols,
No way.
Tim Russ, Marina
Oh my
Sirtis,
gosh.
so many more.
No! Oh, wow. Do you think that since he's a big Star Trek fan, while he was directing them, he was, getting starstruck? I would have been.
Yeah, that would have been great to find out from him. We should ask him in the interview.
Yeah, let's ask him. We have a lot of Star Trek Picard news to share with you, as we've been waiting for more than a year for the imminent return of Star Trek Picard Season 2. There's been multiple trailers out there for a while, and I can't wait to see the return of Jean-Luc Picard. Of course, we get to see the La Sirena crew. However, one thing I noticed is Issa Briones, who plays the Capellius android Soji Asha, she's only in a few seconds of footage out of all of the trailers. Is her role going to be reduced, Brian?
You know, I would say it's a safe bet that Issa Briones' role won't be as prominent, but she'll be alongside Jean-Luc. You know, aside from playing 3 android characters, the twins Soji and Dodge, plus Sutra with the golden-like skin like Data, this season is more about Jean-Luc Picard with his alternate choices of the space-time continuum. Q opens up to Mon Capitaine.
Welcome to the road not taken.
Q's connection with Picard is a welcome return, but Q also has a fear and past connection that we've never explored with Guinan, played by Whoopi Goldberg, who's back to reprise her iconic role.
No doubt, another iconic actor returns in a Star Trek role. This week, all U.S. fans can immerse in the experience of Picard Season 2 on Paramount+.
Can't wait for it. Now, these one-liners Guinan is telling Picard in this line, "The answers are not in the stars," she says. To me, it's building up anticipation for seeing what happens next. Plus, what happens to Alison Pill's character, Dr. Agnes Girardi, after the Season 1 cliffhanger, where she kills off Bruce Maddox after a mind meld from the Romulan posing as a Vulcan. And remember the Chief of Security in Starfleet, the character O? Now, O also convinces Girardi to swallow a bioorganic tracking compound to track the La Sirena crew. Now, this gives us conceivably the most shocking episode conclusion in Picard's first season.
Yes, I agree. I can't forget about that storyline into Season 2, which was actually shot here around Los Angeles somewhere on the friendly freeways. Plus, seeing how Picard in his non-human form reacts to Dr. Alton Soong, Data's brother, and Riker is said to appear.
Yes. All the news this week is about Star Trek Picard.
Bass,
Oh. You know, Raj, we may look like we're in your world from your view screen perspective on this Federation starship, but really, you're in my world. I'm staring right back at you.
Thanks, Lily.
How about this, Raj? Why don't you go ahead and introduce our next guest?
Sounds great, Bass. Our next guest is a director, producer, writer, and a cinematographer. He has worked with many top actors from Hollywood, whether they are his own films or other projects he has a passion for. He will also confirm the existence of our friend, Dustin. Everyone, please welcome our guest, Scott Baker.
Hey, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Producer Dustin Serrano, he's real, right? And what was he like to work with?
I can confirm that Dustin does in fact exist in the flesh. I've personally touched him. It was an exciting experience. Yeah. Dustin's a great guy, and he's got a great attitude, super upbeat and happy kind of guy. Lights up the room, and pleasure to have around on set.
So by trade, you work mostly as a cinematographer, right? Now, how did you get into that, Scott?
My primary thing that I'm most often on set doing is Steadicam, traditional camera operating. I do cinematography. You know, I write and direct as well. It kind of came for me when I was younger, and I wanted to be an actor, and I was in school plays and church plays and community theater and things like that, and then started fooling around with my dad's VHS camera and Beta camera with my buddies and making little skits so that I could act in them. And then I kind of fell in love with the actual filmmaking process more than the acting, and then that sort of became what I was interested in doing, is telling stories and using the camera and things like that. And it was just like a journey of learning how to do everything myself. I didn't go to film school, so it was just getting cameras and playing around and watching movies and watching the behind the scenes of the movies and seeing how the professionals did things and trying to emulate that on a low budget, no budget level.
One of your first projects began with your early success in filmmaking, Scotty. You won the Dragon Con Independent Film Fest Award for Best Short Film, titled The Diary of Anne Frank of the Dead. You're the director, writer, and producer on that film. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was the first project that I did that sort of kind of caught on as far as like winning film festivals and venturing into the web series space when that was first starting out. Did a lot of those 48-hour film projects. If you're not familiar, those are like you have 48 hours to make a short film. They give you certain elements, and then you kind of go out and have to turn around a 5-minute short film in 2 days. And that's something that helped me grow as a filmmaker, learning how to just go out and shoot something, and the kind of triage of filmmaking where you've got a million things that you want to do, but not enough time. So let's figure out, what are the 5 things that I really absolutely necessarily need in order to tell this story, and let's shoot those things. At the end of 2 days, you have a short film. So I did those quite a bit. Then I took some of that crew that I'd worked with on some of those films, and we made Anne Frank of the Dead with that crew. And it was just a short film that is like a spoof trailer. Like, what if they actually made a movie that was a zombie movie, and it's, Anne Frank is fighting zombies to stay alive, and it's the kind of movie that you wouldn't, that you almost couldn't see making, because it's politically incorrect and it would be too offensive. But that's sort of the joke of the trailer, right? Is that this is the movie that could exist, and then subsequently they've made similar films, but not quite over the top like this one. And it was a fun project to do, and because it was so short and kind of funny in the early days of YouTube and stuff like that, it caught on and won some film festival awards and stuff like that.
That's so fascinating. I have to ask, since you're a cinematographer, what are your thoughts on the tragic death of Helena Hutching, the DP for Alec Baldwin's film Rust?
Helena's actually a very close friend of mine. I worked with her on probably about 10 different projects, and I was her Steadicam operator on quite a few projects. We went to Florida together on a film. We went to New Orleans together on a film. Shot out in the desert. Shot a film out here in LA with her. I had coffee with her probably a week and a half before she went out to New Mexico, and we talked about me being on the project, and that there was being the type of budget that it was, hiring local people and everything like that. And so from a personal level, it's an absolute tragedy, and I miss Helena, and she was a really wonderful person, one of the most talented cinematographers I've ever worked with, and a loss on a professional and on a personal level.
Now, Scotty, we know that you're a big Star Trek fan, like us all here on A Captain's Log. What got you into it? What inspired you?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was a kid, used to watch the reruns of the original series on TV. My dad would put them on, and because my dad loved sci-fi, he loved Star Trek, and all the other sci-fi shows, Twilight Zone. Absolutely loved the Twilight Zone. Growing up in the 80s, it was Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica, and definitely, Star Trek has always been the kind of the backbone of like the modern science fiction that we have in film and television. You can always look back to those classic episodes with Kirk and Spock, and the films as well. When I was a kid, watching Wrath of Khan, when the little bug is going into Chekhov's ear, that was scarier to me than any horror film I had ever seen, and that scared the living daylights out of me. To this day, I have a fear of bugs crawling in my ear because of that scene in that movie. It's it's always stuck with me that, 'cause that's one of those primal fears, is a bug crawling inside of your body, and so always been a fan of Star Trek. And when I was in junior high and high school, it was Next Generation and Voyager and Deep Space Nine were on. When I started making my own films and wanting to tell my own stories, those stories gravitated towards Star Trek type things, Twilight Zone type stories that were in that world of science fiction and fantasy and even horror.
Renegades, Arminara, Space Command TV series, The Sons of Kirk, Star Trek Renegades, Trek Isolation. Now, those are just a few productions Scotty has been on with the heavy Star Trek ensemble cast. Now, perhaps the biggest and most Star Trek cast is your Fifth Passenger film that you directed, wrote, and produced, Scotty. Let's shift gears just a little bit to talk about how a chain reaction of Star Trek actors knew each other on your film, The Fifth Passenger. There were 6 Star Trek alumni actors in that. Tell us about what it was like and how casting came to fruition.
So when I started to put Fifth Passenger together, at the same time that I was writing that script, I was in LA and I was working with different people on different sets, and just started meeting, I started meeting actors and people who had worked on all sorts of television. I came to start working on a couple productions that had some actors from Star Trek in it. And because I was writing a science fiction script, I just sort of gravitated towards them, and so, struck up conversations with them, and it kind of just started to snowball after that, as far as Star Trek type shows, and with those actors is. So the Star Trek actors actually, they become friends after the show because they're going on these convention circuits, and at this point now, you're talking, it's 20, 30 years out from Next Generation, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine, that these actors have spent more time together on the convention circuit than they spent working on the shows together. And so you have actors who are, one of them was in Voyager and one was in Deep Space Nine and one was in Next Generation, and all 3 of them are great friends because there are these conventions and they go and have dinner and have drinks afterwards, or they're sitting there signing autographs, joking around with each other and things like that. And so that was sort of I started working with a couple actors, and then they said, oh, hey, I can reach out to so-and-so. They, maybe they'd love to be in this project as well. And so as we were casting the film, casting Star Trek actors for it, it just became this thing, and I just got kind of sucked into the world of, Star Trek actors and Star Trek fans and fan films and things like that, and it became a dream come true sort of thing to have this science fiction film with these Star Trek actors, because as I was writing the film and trying to put it together, my mind is okay, this is going to be a super low budget film. I'm not going to be able to afford the big name actors, and so I'm probably just going to have to cast unknown people. But just through all these things, I was finding these Star Trek actors who were willing to work on it. To me, that was just like the perfect thing. It was like, okay, I'm getting actors who are already kind of part of this world, who the fans recognize and things like that. And it just, obviously it wasn't something I planned. It just sort of, organically happened.
That's so cool. So it sounds like we can safely say Star Trek and The Twilight Zone are what inspired you to write and direct your movie, The Fifth Passenger.
I'd say Twilight Zone, definitely. There's a couple of Twilight Zone episodes that sort of like inspired that idea, and I've always loved science fiction and horror and fantasy as a way to talk about larger issues, to talk about philosophical questions, moral, ethical dilemmas. When you're able to step outside of reality and use different things as metaphors for what you're really talking about, it to me it's a much more palatable way of having this conversation.
Wow, that is amazing. Now I have to ask, being that you are a Star Trek fan, how did it feel directing Star Trek alumni? And bonus question, who was your favorite to work with?
I mean, it was really an amazing opportunity to be able to work with the Star Trek actors. I got to say, of all of them, I felt kind of starstruck working with Marina Sirtis. She's the one that I remember from when I was the youngest, watching Next Generation and stuff like that. Or just she has an air about her. She's fabulous to work with, but there was a little bit of oh my God, I got Marina Sirtis on set. But I have to say, all of them are fantastic actors, and there's something about television actors versus movie actors. So if you're on a show like Star Trek, you're working on Star Trek 10-12 hours a day, 5-6 days a week for 8 months every season for 8 years. So it's like your day job. They're there every day. They memorize their dialogue super fast. It's like a machine. They just they've got it down, and film actors traditionally do a couple movies a year, and it's maybe a month long, and they're here and there, but it's a different kind of process. And I found that all of the Star Trek actors just have this ability to just be there, hit their marks, and if I give them notes on, let's try, be a little bit more angry, or be a little bit less angry, or do this or do that. It was those kind of adjustments, just snap into those things and be able to just fire them off real quick. Or if they kind of flub a line, then they just take it back and I'll just go again. And then they give their line and they hit it, and the sort of efficiency with which they work just really surprised me, because it was my first time working with that sort of high level television actor before who was on their game and knew it. I'd say Armin Shimmerman is who plays Quark in Deep Space Nine is a phenomenal actor. He teaches Shakespeare at USC. He's got a theater out in Glendale and does classic, Shakespeare and Chekhov and things like that. A pleasure working with all of them, all very dedicated, very skilled actors, and down to earth and fun to work with. And it was a pretty fun set, even though we were kind of under the gun to try to move things because we were on a tight schedule and stuff like that. But a lot of laughing and having fun and trying things out and everything like that. So.
Scotty, you've done camera, or more specifically Steadicam, for practically every genre in Hollywood.
Wow.
Tell us about your experiences on some of those projects and how you met Star Trek actors along the way.
One of the first Star Trek actors that I worked with was Manu Intiraymi, who was Icheb in Star Trek Voyager, and ended up casting him in Fifth Passenger to be the male lead. I met him on a project of a friend of mine, Prince Bagdasarian, was shooting a thing, and they wanted a Steadicam. This was very early days of me getting into doing Steadicam as a side gig. I had a day job that I was doing, and he brought me out for this project, and I started to talk with Manu, and he was telling me about his experiences on Star Trek, and I was still writing Fifth Passenger, and I said, I've got the script, and It seems like you might be good for one of the roles if you want to take a read on it. So yeah, so he was super excited about it and wanted to come on board, and he was one of the people that helped us get some of the other Star Trek actors. Like I said, they've all kind of developed these relationships with each other, and so that and then I started working on this other project called Space Command. With Mark Zickery, who's a director, and Ryan Husk was one of the people that was helping to produce and organize with the cast and things like that. And Doug Jones was on that film, and that's how he came to meet Doug. Let's say Robert Picardo was on that one as well. And we had at one point we'd had Picardo attached on to Fifth Passenger, but his schedule when we finally got the dates for when we were going to shoot, it didn't work out with his schedule, so we had to recast his part.
Scotty, we're showing our viewers your picture at the 2018 Star Trek Las Vegas convention, where you're posing with one of today's biggest Star Trek actors, Doug Jones, who plays Saru in Star Trek Discovery. This is the year's biggest annual Star Trek convention, and you're clearly partying and having a blast. I mean, it's not just a pose, right? We know you're a huge Trekkie. I'm so jealous. What's with you living the Trek high life with these stars, huh?
I go to the conventions because some of my friends are Star Trek fans, and some of my friends are the Star Trek actors. I go to the convention and I'm wandering around, and there's Doug signing autographs, and I wait until he's got a minute when he's not signing autographs, and I say, "Hey, Doug, what's up?" And he's like, "Oh, Scotty," and he comes over and he squeezes your cheeks, and he wants to give you a big hug. And Doug is one of probably the nicest, kindest person on the planet. No offense to anybody's grandma. Super humble about what he's doing as far as being an actor and having fans and everything like that. Not at all above anybody. And we had a good time shooting on Fifth Passenger, and big smile across your face when you're around Doug.
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log. We're here interviewing the wonderful Scotty Baker. Check out these facts. What's your favorite Star Trek series? And, working with some of the actors, did you let them know how much you appreciate Trek?
Still the original series. Maybe it's a bit of nostalgia because it was what I first watched when I was a kid. I mean, I'm not that old. I didn't watch while it was on. I watched the reruns, but it was still the first show that I had seen. The Kirk and Spock dynamic, and even though the show is campy, there's just something real kind of pure about that. And I think all the shows have something redeemable about them. Next Generation is hailed by many people as like the best show, and I totally get that, and I see that, and there are episodes in there like Measure of a Man is one of my favorite, because that to me does what I want out of a Star Trek show. Characters talking about existence, talking about identity, talking about what does it mean to be alive and to be sentient, that's what I want science fiction to be doing. I don't know that I've had the opportunity to tell any of the actors personally. I've worked with Nichelle Nichols quite a bit and talked to her a bit about the show. Tim Russ is probably the actor that I've had the most conversations with, because him and I are close friends now.
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Scotty, tell us about your upcoming projects and the Seventh Rule podcast, Virtual Trek Conn.
The Seventh Rule is an ongoing podcast, and you can go on YouTube and check that out. That's ongoing every week. I think they've got a couple shows, and there's a couple that are kind of tangential going on with that. We've got Virtual Trek Conn, which is coming up in March. It's 18th to 21st, and we're doing the first ever Star Trek award show. It's kind of like an Emmy or an Oscars. It's called the LLAPy Awards, like LLAPy, Live Long and Prosper. It's got cool categories like favorite character from a new Star Trek show and stuff like that.
Scotty, thank you for joining us here on A Captain's Log.
Yeah.
We're so glad to be back for another season of A Captain's Log.
Yes, and many more guests like Scotty are yet to come, along with the latest news on all the 5 current Star Trek series, with the classic legacy Trek mixed for you to get your fix.
That's right. Live long and prosper.
Hello, happy, my old friend. I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy.